Good morning. I'm Dr. Gregory Young and have the pleasure of serving as Acting Associate Commissioner and Medical Director for the Western New York and Finger Lakes region of the New York State Department of Health. I'd like to welcome everyone to Western New York. I'd like to give a special welcome to Governor Cuomo. It's great to have the governor back here in Western New York. Today we'll hear from State Police Superintendent Joe D'Amico, District Attorney Frank Sedita, Brandy Smith, and then Governor Cuomo. We're here to announce a new effort in the state's fight to crack down on dangerous health salts and synthetic drugs. Over the past year, these substances have become very popular as sellers and buyers have been able to use these dangerous drugs while circumventing the existing state laws. As an ED doc with over 30 years experience, I can say without question that bath salts, which are closely related to amphetamines and cocaine, and synthetic drugs related to marijuana pose a major risk to public health. When consumed, these substances produce dangerous effects including hallucinations, paranoia, suicidal thoughts and actions, delusions, violent behavior, chest pain, increases in heart rate and blood pressure, and even cause kidney failure and death. Over recent years, we've seen a rise in the instance of the use of these dangerous drugs. In 2011, there were 39 reported emergency department visits in upstate New York as a result of bath salts alone. In 2012, to date, there have been 191 visits, with 120 occurring in the last 2 months. According to the New York City's Poison Control Center, in 2010, there were 20 calls regarding the synthetic marijuana products. There were 291 in 2011, and to date, in 2012, there have been 321 over the last 7 months. As a physician and public health official, I can only stress how important it is to get these dangerous drugs off the streets. It is a growing problem, and I can commend the governor for his work to protect New Yorkers from these harmful substances. The new regulations today, issued at the governor's request by the Department of Health and approved by the State Public Health and Health Planning Council, will expand the existing list of prohibited drugs and chemicals to include dozens of new substances that are now being made to synthesize these drugs, ensuring that distributors can no longer skirt the law by simply modifying the drug's chemical structures. In addition, the regulations will allow, for the first time, an owner of an establishment and/or an employee selling synthetic drugs to be charged with possession of an illicit substance. Further, the regulations increase the criminal penalties for those who violate the rules. Violators would face a fine of up to $500 and potentially 15 days in jail. Additional civil penalties under Public Health Law 12 would allow for $2,000 per violation to also be assessed. And there's a new expedited process allowing the Department of Health to shut down stores that sell these terrible drugs. We'll be launching a new public outreach effort and educational campaign, including a revamped website and a new 24-hour hotline where New Yorkers can report witnessing, purchasing, and distribution of these drugs. The number will be 1-888-99-SALTS, S-A-L-T-S. Again, that's 1-888-99-SALTS. I'd now like to introduce Superintendent Joe D'Amico. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning. I'm Joe D'Amico, Superintendent of New York State Police. Synthetic drugs such as bath salts have become part of a growing trend we in law enforcement are witnessing in illicit designer drug use. They become a major public safety issue in New York State and, in fact, across the entire nation. Categorized as stimulants, they have the same dangerous effect on the human body as an amphetamine or cocaine. And with the chemical makeup of these drugs constantly being altered and the long-term effects being unknown at this point, they may actually be more dangerous. Despite state and federal efforts to bring bath salts and synthetic drugs under control, sellers use a variety of brand names such as White Lightning, Snow Leopard, Tranquility, Zoom, Ivory Wave, Red Dove, and Vanilla Sky, and others, to help conceal the identity of these drugs and to appeal to the buyers. We in law enforcement have seen increasingly violent and vicious attacks from individuals under the effect of these substances. The many stories about bizarre attacks and irrational behavior from people on these drugs have been well publicized, and in most cases because of the extreme behavior and actions involved. These drugs often produce behaviors such as suicidal tendencies, paranoia, and other forms of erratic, violent, or aggressive actions. These behaviors put innocent people, family, and law enforcement in extreme danger. Tougher and more wide-sweeping state criminal laws are not yet here. Although federal law bans the manufacture and sale of many of these substances, as a result of the new regulations put in place today thanks to Governor Cuomo, local law enforcement, including the state police, will be able to pursue violators and refer individuals to continue to sell these drugs to the local DAs for prosecution, rather than having to rely on the federal justice system for our relief. We look forward to working with the Department of Health and with their Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement in enforcing these new rules and protecting all New Yorkers from the harmful effects of bath salts and other synthetic drugs. At this time, I'd like to introduce the District Attorney for Erie County, Frank Sedita.
Good morning. My name is Frank Sedita. I'm the DA of Erie County. I'd like to welcome the governor to Buffalo and to Western New York for the second time this week. All right. Anything to escape Albany in August? Yes. As the previous speakers have noted, we are becoming all too familiar with the recent outbreak of crimes and violent acts that have resulted from the use of bath salts and other synthetic drugs, also known as designer drugs. The chief problem for us in law enforcement in combating this problem is that many of these synthetic drugs are currently legal to sell and legal to use. In other words, the long arm of the law has not kept up with the loathsome chemists turned dealers who invent and who distribute these poisons. They don't care about the consequences of their actions. All they care about is making a quick buck, as do the owners of the so-called legitimate businesses that sell this poison. That's why the new regulations put in place today at Governor Cuomo's direction will assist law enforcement, will assist us in our fight to protect us and especially our kids from these dangerous drugs. And I speak from the heart from that. I have a boy who's going to turn 16 in a couple weeks, and I would like nothing more to see this junk off the streets. The new regulations expand the list of prohibited drugs and chemicals to include dozens more substances that are now used to make synthetic drugs, ensuring that distributors can no longer skirt the law by modifying the drugs, by changing their chemical composition. In addition to prohibiting the manufacturing, distribution, and offer of sale of synthetic drugs, the regulations issued today will, for the first time, provide both for the owner of the establishment and an employee selling synthetic drugs to be charged with possession of an illicit substance. It is the duty of those in law enforcement, of me and the wonderful folks that stand behind me today, to protect the public. And I thank Governor Cuomo for his leadership in confronting this important issue. And with that, I'd like to introduce Brandy Smith.
Thank you, District Attorney Sedita. My name is Brandy Smith. I was born and raised in Batavia, New York. I still currently live there. I am very honored to be able to join Governor Cuomo today for this life-changing announcement that he is making. The reason I'm here is because my brother Jason is addicted to synthetic drugs. Bath salts. He started out with synthetic marijuana, and that ended up not being enough, so he decided to start using bath salts. The bath salts have ruined his life, and they're ruining our family's life as well. The reason that we're here today, and the reason that I am here, is to raise awareness about this serious problem, because it is deeply affecting communities, especially mine in Batavia. We've seen a lot of very bizarre things happening within the last couple of months, my brother being included in those activities. He had everything, and he now has nothing. I don't even recognize my brother. In the past couple of months, have not ever been able to even sit and have a normal conversation. Every conversation is about the paranoia and the delusions and being accused that I'm trying to hurt him, even though I'm really trying to help him. There came a point when Jason's business started failing, and we knew things weren't right. I had spoke to my parents and said that I thought he may have a drug problem. They didn't want to believe it, and some time went by, and eventually we were at his house almost every day for calls of ghosts. He thought that he was possessed by the devil. He at one point even called a Catholic priest and asked to have an exorcism. We found empty wrappers of bath salts everywhere. At that point, of course, he did not try to deny that he had a problem. The brand of bath salts that he preferably chose was Amped. It's actually right over there on the board. And he was buying it at a local smoke shop in Batavia, the 420 Emporium. In the last few months, couple of months, the issues of the paranoia and the delusions, they get worse and worse. His business had to even be shut down. I actually shut the business down, locked the doors. He didn't even know that I did it. It took a month and a half before he asked me who was working and how much money he owed the employees for me to tell him his business had been closed. He was blessed with 2 children, a 2-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son, whom, despite the fact that Child Protective Services worked with him for months and gave them many opportunities to keep custody of their children, they lost both of their children. They are no longer allowed, him and his ex-fiance, to visit their daughter unless they're at the Department of Social Services. They're allowed a 15-minute visit, and they have to test clean before they go in for the visit. He's only been able to make 2 visits, and his ex-fiance has only been able to make 3 or 4. He cannot call his children on the phone without permission. He's pretty much lost everything due to these bath salts. They're just way too overpowering for him to overcome. There's times he runs away from the house because he'll tell you that the SWAT team is out front gearing up to get him, and you're right there and there's no SWAT team. Although there's times you wish there was, because then you would know he was safe. We live day in and day out worrying that we're going to find him dead one of these days. I just don't see how any person could continue to live a life using these substances. They are, in my eyes, I consider them very evil. They're horrible. He went into rehab, and he walked out in less than 12 hours' time. And he's not been able to go back into a rehab because he doesn't have any health insurance and he doesn't qualify for state funding to get in there. So we're now hoping that a judge can court mandate him into a rehab so he can get the help he needs. Everything he's ever owned, he has pawned. He owns nothing. He has no TVs, nothing. He has sold every belonging that he has in order to buy bath salts and get high. I've lost my brother. I feel like he is just a lost soul out there, and I don't know what it's gonna take to help him. Jason could be any one of your sons any one of your fathers, your brother, your friend, your neighbor. This can happen to anybody. And this is the reason why we need this regulation put in place by Governor Cuomo. And the most helpful thing that we can do is to help law enforcement officials, healthcare professionals, by raising awareness of the danger of these drugs. We need parents, teachers, and kids to understand what this does to individuals, families, and communities. Governor Cuomo is doing the right thing by implementing this regulation. It is something that we desperately need, and I thank him so much for doing this. If anybody ever has any information about these bath salts, like was spoke before by the doctor, please call that hotline. You may think that a little piece of information is not enough, but every little piece of information helps. So please, anybody, if you have any information, I beg and I plead with you to please report this so we can help law enforcement with this new regulation. You could really be saving somebody's life, and you could be saving somebody's family. So please don't think that something little is not good enough. I want to thank Governor Cuomo for his deep commitment to protecting New Yorkers against synthetic drugs, and it is now my honor to introduce Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. First, it's my pleasure to be back in Western New York. As the district attorney mentioned, I was here over the weekend working on Peace Bridge. It's a pleasure to be back today. I'm pleased to be joined by our men and women of law enforcement. Let's give them a round of applause and thank them for what they do. To the Department of Health, I congratulate them on their actions that they're taking today. District Attorney Sedita, pleasure to be with you. We thank you for your good work and your good service. State Police Superintendent Joseph D'Amico, I thank you for all you're doing and the great leadership you've brought to the State Police and for your initiative today in combating this problem. Brandy, thank you. I know it's not easy to get up here. I know it's not easy to get up here in general. Some days it's not easy for me to get up here. But it's especially hard for you to stand up and talk about a story that is personal and about your family. And we know that you do it because you want to make sure that other people don't have to feel the pain that you and your family have felt. And we know that it takes courage for you to do what you did, and we thank you for it. Brandy, thank you very much. There are a lot of words that have been used to describe this situation, and let me just try to make it a little simpler. We talk about bath salts, we talk about designer drugs, synthetic marijuana. It's simpler than all of that. We're talking about poison. This is poison that is being distributed and sold. All this Mr. Happy California Dreams, Blueberry Blast, it is poison. It is a new face on a very old enemy. It's an enemy that we fought decade after decade. The enemy is drugs. And it's been an ongoing battle. And when you beat one manifestation of the drugs, it comes back in another form, sometimes more virulent. But whether it's crack cocaine, or it's methamphetamines, or it's heroin back in the old days, this is just the newest explosion of that old enemy. And in some ways, it's more dangerous, and it's more insidious, because this wasn't sold in a back alley. This wasn't sold on a street corner. This isn't sold in the shadows. This is sold in broad daylight, over the counter, in stores all across the state and all across this nation. And what was outrageous about this situation is they said it was legal. And you could have a young person walk into a store. This is on a rack in a convenience store, in a gasoline station, and they would walk in and they would buy it. And it was cheap, relatively cheap, and a relatively inexpensive high. And that is why, in many ways, this is one of the most dangerous forms of this enemy that we've dealt with in a long, long time. Now, the first thing we have to do is bring clarity to the situation. These are poisons. That's what they are. And today, by regulation of the Department of Health in the state of New York, it is illegal to sell these substances. It is illegal to possess these substances. It's illegal for a clerk to sell. It's illegal for a store owner to own a store where this is sold. It is illegal to buy. It is illegal to possess. It is illegal to carry. It is against the law, and you can go to jail for sale or possession of this poison, of this drug. The Department of Health is taking an emergency regulation that will make it so. So clarity, this is none of the above. All these phony words and all this false advertising. They're selling poison, and it is illegal to do it in the state. And due to the good efforts of the men and women in law enforcement, those laws are going to be affected. And as Brandy said, this is, as usual, a battle that's going to take all of us to win. Parents have to be informed about this. They have to be informed. You look at the packets, they seem nice, they seem friendly. You wouldn't notice them if they were on your child's nightstand. They're anything but. Parents have to be informed. Teachers have to be informed. Friends, citizens have to be informed, because it really is an insidious challenge. We will deal with it the way we've dealt with the others, and we take a first big step today. But this is a very real danger, especially for our young people at vulnerable times. And I thank and applaud the men and women of law enforcement and the Department of Health today for stepping up and taking this first big step in fighting this most recent scourge in our state. Thank you. Now I'd ask the District Attorney, Department of Health Superintendent, to join me. Any questions? Thank you very much for being here. Brandy, thank you. New regulation, we can give it to you today, but just to keep it simple and clear, by a regulation that is being issued by the Department of Health, State of New York, it is illegal to sell or possess chemical compounds, drugs that represent these new synthetic marijuana, designer drugs, bath salts, and compounds that will be derived from these compounds. What has happened in the past is you stop one specific drug, they would go back to the lab and tweak it a little bit and come back with another drug and say, well, this is a new drug. This regulation says sale or possession, which means it's very sweeping. Sale or possession is illegal of these chemical compounds or compounds derived from these compounds.
Governor, can you explain how these manufacturers skirted around how they can actually sell to these stores, how they kind of got around?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it really is, I think, the first time we've seen this, is a boldness and an outrageousness to this effort. We are accustomed to drugs being sold out of broad daylight, right, with a certain awareness that it was illegal. This had a different premise. Their premise was, we're going to try to do it legally. We're going to sell it over the counter. And there was no secrecy about it. And this was a chemical compound. It was formed in the lab. It was a relatively new compound. So there had been no pre-existing law or regulation on it. And they went about to create literally a commercial enterprise selling legally over the counter. We are just now really understanding what it is and seeing the effects of it and studying it. And today, the state of New York is saying this is an illegal drug that shouldn't be sold in the state. But you're exactly right. Their first attempt was, they're going to say it's legal. And there was a blatancy about this that is breathtaking.
Governor, this is made and marketed and packaged in some factory somewhere. Are you going after those people who actually manufacture this as well?
Yeah, we will be doing both. You know, this is like any situation where you're trying to arrest the spread of drugs. It's the manufacturer, the distribution, the end user. So we're talking about the convenience store that sells them, and then we'll work our way up the chain.
So, Paul, if this is poison, the fines you're talking about, $500 and possibly 15 days, do you think that those have strong enough teeth to make a
Well,
difference?
we'll see. You know, jail is jail, you know, and going to jail is never a good thing. But we'll see how it goes, and if we need stiffer penalties as we go along, we'll push for those. Is the hotline open? Is it operational now, do we know? Yes. It is operational now. It's informational. You can report a person who you believe or a store that you believe is selling these drugs, or you can inquire how to get help for someone or get in contact with law enforcement.
I don't know if we can talk about this, but can you talk about the change that state police now has, they can ask if they think that somebody is involved?
What can the state police now do? I'll ask the superintendent to answer that question.
All right, part of the difficulty in enforcing this is under the current penal law, there's only a couple of chemical compounds that are named in New York state law that that previously made it unlawful to possess. What the new regulation will do, once the regulation is out and these premises have been notified and put on notice that they can't sell this stuff, it's a violation of the public health law, which is what will actually be enforcing it. It'll give us some teeth to go in and take the product off the shelf and issue at least appearance tickets, and it also gives the Department of Health opportunity to follow up with these locations for civil proceedings.
So in other words, by this regulation, it's now illegal to sell or to possess. As the superintendent mentioned, if an establishment has repeat offenses, the Department of Health will also be able to close the establishment down. Okay? Thank you all very much for taking the time to come. Thank you very much. Nicely done.